I discovered Mary was laughing with her lover while reading my suicide note draft. She did not panic. She did not deny it. She simply smiled at me with that same gentle expression she always wore and said, "David, you are too dramatic. Nobody writes a suicide note and does not go through with it. You just want attention." Her voice was soft, almost soothing, as if she were comforting a child throwing a tantrum. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. The note was still open on my laptop screen, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence where I had stopped writing because I heard her voice in the other room. I had walked toward the sound hoping for comfort, hoping she would sense something was wrong, hoping she would ask me what was bothering me. Instead, I found her on a video call with him. George. Her childhood friend. The man she always said was like a brother to her. They were laughing together, their faces close to the screen, sharing some private joke I would never understand. And then I heard her say it. She said, "He wrote another one of those notes again. Can you believe it?" George laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "Let me guess. He is threatening to leave you unless you give him more attention." Mary giggled and replied, "Exactly. He is so needy. I do not know how much longer I can deal with this." My stomach turned. My hands started shaking. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them see how much pain I was in. But I did not. I just stood there in the doorway, watching them. Watching her mock the darkest parts of me. Watching him encourage her cruelty. That was the moment I realized something. I had been crying alone for months, begging for her to see me, to care, to just ask if I was okay. And all this time, she had been laughing at me behind my back. Sharing my pain with another man like it was entertainment. I wiped my face. I closed the laptop. I walked back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Something inside me snapped that night. Not loudly. Not violently. Just a quiet, cold break. Like ice cracking under weight. And I knew one thing for certain. If she could laugh at my tears, then I would make sure she cried, rivers begging for mercy. My name is David, and I used to believe that love could heal anything. I was 22 when I met Mary. She was 21, fresh out of university, working part-time at a bookstore, near my office. I remember the first time I saw her. She was organizing a shelf of poetry books, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, humming softly to herself. There was something about her that felt safe. Calm. Like she carried peace with her wherever she went. I started going to that bookstore every week, pretending I needed new books, just so I could see her. Eventually, I worked up the courage to talk to her. She smiled at me, asked what kind of books I liked, and recommended 3 that she said would change my life. She was right. Not because the books were extraordinary, but because talking to her did. We started dating 3 months later. Mary was everything I thought I wanted. She was kind, soft-spoken, thoughtful. She remembered small details about me. She brought me tea when I worked late. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She made me feel like I mattered. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone actually saw me. My childhood had been cold. My father left when I was 6. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. I grew up learning that emotions were inconvenient, that asking for help was weakness, that you survived by staying silent and pushing through. So when Mary came into my life and told me it was okay to feel things, it was like she handed me permission to be human. We got married 2 years later. It was a small wedding, just close family and a few friends. Mary wore a simple white dress. I wore a suit I borrowed from my cousin. We exchanged vows under a tree in her parents' backyard. She cried when she said I do. I thought it was because she was happy. Looking back now, I wonder if she was already having doubts. The first few years of marriage were good. We rented a small apartment in the city. I worked long hours as a junior accountant, trying to build a career. Mary worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. We did not have much money, but we had each other. Or at least, I thought we did. I started noticing small changes around the 3rd year. Mary became distant. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She spent more time on her phone, more time locked in the bedroom on calls. When I asked her if something was wrong, she would smile that same gentle smile and say, "Nothing is wrong, David. You are overthinking." So I believed her. I always believed her. Because I loved her. And because I was terrified of losing her. Around that time, I started struggling with my mental health. The pressure at work was crushing. My boss was verbally abusive. I was working 14-hour days, barely sleeping, barely eating. I started having panic attacks. I would wake up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, my chest tight, feeling like I was dying. I tried to talk to Mary about it. I told her I was struggling. I told her I needed help. She listened. She nodded. She said, "You just need to relax, David. Maybe take a vacation." But I did not need a vacation. I needed her to hold me and tell me I was not going crazy. I needed her to see that I was falling apart. Instead, she started avoiding me. She would leave the room when I got emotional. She would sigh heavily whenever I tried to talk about my feelings. One night, after a particularly bad panic attack, I begged her to just sit with me. I was on the floor of our bathroom, sobbing, unable to breathe. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "David, I cannot keep doing this. You need to get it together." That was when I started writing the notes. Not real suicide notes. Just drafts. Thoughts. Ways to express the pain I could not say out loud. I never planned to go through with it. I just needed somewhere to put the darkness. But Mary found one of the drafts on my laptop. Instead of asking if I was okay, instead of being concerned, she screenshot it and sent it to George. I know because I saw the message thread later. She wrote, "Look at this. He is doing it again." George replied, "Ignore him. He just wants you to baby him." And she sent back a laughing emoji. A laughing emoji. I could not believe it. The woman I married, the woman I trusted with my deepest pain, was mocking me. She was sharing my suffering with another man and laughing about it. That was when I started paying closer attention. I noticed how often she texted George. How her face lit up when his name appeared on her screen. How she would smile during their calls in a way she never smiled at me anymore. I started checking her phone when she was asleep. I know it was wrong. I know it was an invasion of privacy. But I needed to know. And what I found destroyed me. Messages talking about how exhausting I was. How needy. How pathetic. George calling me weak. Mary agreeing. Photos of them together at coffee shops, at parks, at places she told me she was going alone. And then I found the voice message. Mary laughing and saying, "Sometimes I wish I never married him." If she could laugh at my tears, then I was going to make sure, she cried, rivers begging for mercy. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late September. I remember the date because it was our 5th wedding anniversary. I had taken the day off work, something I rarely did, and planned a surprise dinner for Mary. Nothing extravagant. I cooked her favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread, and bought a small bouquet of daisies from the flower shop near our apartment. I set the table with candles, dimmed the lights, and waited for her to come home. She was supposed to be back by 6. By 7, she still had not shown up. I texted her asking where she was. No response. I called twice. Both times, it went straight to voicemail. By 8, the food was cold. The candles had burned halfway down. I sat alone at the table, staring at my phone, trying not to let the familiar ache in my chest turn into something worse. At 9:30, the door finally opened. Mary walked in laughing, her phone pressed to her ear. She barely glanced at me as she kicked off her shoes and said into the phone, "I know, right? That was so funny. I will talk to you later." She hung up and looked at me for the first time. Her smile faded when she saw the table, the cold food, the melted candles. She said, "Oh. Was tonight something special?" I stared at her. My throat was tight. I could barely get the words out. I said, "It is our anniversary." She blinked. Then she laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Just a light, dismissive laugh. Like she had forgotten something trivial. She said, "Oh my God, David. I completely forgot. I am sorry. I was out with Sarah. We lost track of time." I nodded slowly. I did not trust myself to speak. I stood up, cleared the table, and threw the food into the trash. Mary watched me for a moment, then sighed. She said, "You are upset." I did not answer. She said, "David. It is not that big of a deal. We can celebrate tomorrow." I turned to look at her. I asked, "Who were you on the phone with?" She hesitated. Just for a second. But I caught it. She said, "Sarah." I said, "You were laughing." She shrugged and said, "We were joking about something. Why does it matter?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let it go. But something in my gut told me she was lying. I said, "Can I see your phone?" Her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I want to see who you were talking to." She crossed her arms and said, "That is ridiculous. I am not showing you my phone. You do not get to interrogate me just because you are in a bad mood." I felt my hands start to shake. I said, "Mary, I just want to know the truth." She said, "The truth is that you are being paranoid and controlling." I said, "I am not controlling. I just want to know who you were with." She raised her voice and said, "I already told you. I was with Sarah. Why do you not believe me?" I did not answer. I just stared at her. She stared back. Then she grabbed her phone, turned around, and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in the kitchen, alone, surrounded by the ruins of the anniversary dinner I had spent hours preparing. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake listening to Mary, typing on her phone in the other room. At 2 a.m, I got up, walked quietly to the bedroom door, and pressed my ear against it. I could hear her voice, soft, whispering. She said, "I know. I am sorry. He is just so exhausting sometimes." Pause. She laughed quietly and said, "No, I did not tell him. He would freak out." Another pause. Then, she said, "I miss you too." My stomach dropped. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my head in my hands. I felt like I was going to throw up. The next morning, Mary acted like nothing had happened. She made herself coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and said she had a busy day ahead. I watched her leave, and the moment the door closed, I grabbed her laptop. I knew her password. She had never changed it. I opened her messages, and there it was. Hundreds of messages between her and George. Messages that went back months. Messages that started innocent but slowly became more intimate, more affectionate, more inappropriate. There were voice notes. I played one. George said, "I hate that you are stuck with him. You deserve someone who actually makes you happy." Mary replied, "I know. I just do not know how to leave." There were photos. Pictures of them together at restaurants, holding hands across the table. Pictures of them at a hotel. I felt the room spin. I scrolled further. I found the conversation where Mary sent him a screenshot of my suicide note draft. She wrote, "He is doing this again. Look how dramatic he is." George replied, "He is manipulating you. You should just leave him." Mary sent a laughing emoji and wrote, "I wish it were that easy." I closed the laptop. I sat there on the couch staring at nothing. My hands were numb. My chest felt hollow. I had suspected. But seeing it, reading it, hearing it, made it real. Mary was cheating on me. And worse, she was mocking my pain with him. She was sharing my darkest moments, my most vulnerable confessions, and turning them into jokes. I thought about confronting her. I thought about screaming, crying, begging her to explain. But I did not. Because I realized something. If I confronted her now, she would lie. She would gaslight me. She would make me feel like I was crazy for doubting her. So instead, I decided to wait. I decided to watch. I decided to gather evidence. And when the time was right, I would make sure she felt every ounce of pain she had caused me. The days that followed felt like I was living in a nightmare I could not wake up from. Every morning, I would open my eyes and for a split second, everything felt normal. Then reality would crash down on me like a wave, and I would remember. Mary was cheating on me. The woman I had built my entire life around, the woman I had sacrificed everything for, was in love with someone else. And she was laughing at my pain while doing it. I started documenting everything. I took screenshots of every message between her and George. I saved every voice note. I recorded the dates and times she claimed to be with Sarah but was actually with him. I became obsessed with gathering proof, not because I wanted to use it against her right away, but because I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. I needed to see just how deep the knife had gone. Mary continued acting normal. She would come home, ask me how my day was, make dinner, watch television with me like nothing was wrong. Sometimes she would even initiate intimacy, and I would go through with it, my mind blank, my body on autopilot. Afterward, she would fall asleep with her head on my chest, and I would lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering how she could do this. How she could betray me and then sleep so peacefully beside me. One evening, about 2 weeks after I discovered the messages, Mary received a phone call while we were eating dinner. She glanced at the screen, her face lighting up for a brief second before she caught herself. She stood up and said, "I need to take this. It is work." She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat there, fork in hand, staring at my plate. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking. I knew it was not work. I knew it was him. I waited until I heard her voice through the door, soft and sweet in a way she had not spoken to me in months. Then I stood up, walked quietly to the door, and pressed my ear against it. She was laughing. She said, I know. I miss you too. I wish I could see you tonight, but David is home." Pause. She giggled and said, "Stop. You are going to make me laugh too loud." Another pause. Then her voice dropped lower, more intimate. She said, "I love you too." I stepped back from the door. My vision blurred. I felt like I was going to be sick. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bathtub with my head in my hands. I wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. I just felt empty. Hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left nothing but a shell. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed next to Mary, listening to her breathe, and I thought about all the years we had spent together. I thought about the promises we had made to each other. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. I had meant those vows. I had believed in them. But clearly, she had not. The next morning, I woke up to find Mary already dressed and putting on makeup in the bathroom. She looked happy, almost glowing. I asked her where she was going. She said, "I am meeting Sarah for brunch." I nodded and said, "Have fun." She kissed me on the cheek and left. The moment the door closed, I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app I had secretly installed on her device 2 days earlier. I watched the little dot on the map move through the city. It did not go to any brunch spot. It went straight to a hotel downtown. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to drive there, to confront them, to drag her out of that room and make her explain herself. But I did not. Because I knew that if I confronted her now, she would find a way to twist it. She would make me the bad guy. She would say I was invading her privacy, that I was controlling, that I was the reason she cheated in the first place. So I waited. I waited and I watched. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more. The way she would smile at her phone when she thought I was not looking. The way she would take extra care with her appearance before going out. The way she would come home smelling like cologne that was not mine. And through it all, she continued to treat me like I was the problem. Whenever I seemed quiet or distant, she would sigh and say, "David, you need to stop being so moody all the time. It is exhausting." Whenever I tried to talk to her about how I was feeling, she would cut me off and say, "Can we not do this right now? I have had a long day." She made me feel like I was suffocating her just by existing. Like my emotions were a burden she could no longer carry. And maybe that was the cruelest part of all. Not just that she was cheating, but that she was making me feel guilty for being hurt. One night, I found another message thread between her and George. This one was different. They were talking about me. George wrote, "When are you going to leave him? You have been saying you will for months." Mary replied, "I know. I just feel bad. He has no one else. If I leave, I do not know what he will do." George wrote, "That is not your responsibility. You cannot stay with him just because you feel sorry for him." Mary replied, "You are right. I just need to find the right time." I stared at that message for a long time. She felt sorry for me. That was why she was still here. Not because she loved me, not because she wanted to work things out, but because she pitied me. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark. My chest ached. My throat was tight. I felt like I was disappearing. Like I was becoming invisible even to myself. That was when I realized something. I had spent so long begging for her love, crying for her attention, trying to fix whatever was broken between us, that I had lost myself completely. I had let her reduce me to nothing. I had let her make me feel small, pathetic, worthless. And I was done. I was done crying. I was done begging. I was done letting her and George laugh at my expense. If she wanted to see me as weak, as pathetic, as someone she could discard without consequence, then I would show her exactly how wrong she was. I would let her think she had won. I would let her believe I was too broken to fight back. And then, when she least expected it, I would take everything from her. The turning point came on a cold Friday night in October. Mary told me she was going to a work event and would be home late. She kissed me on the forehead, grabbed her purse, and left. I waited 10 minutes, then checked the tracking app. She was heading to the same hotel downtown, the same one she had been to 3 times before. This time, I decided to follow her. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds like something a desperate, unhinged person would do. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to confirm what I already knew, because part of me, some small, pathetic part of me, still hoped I was wrong. I drove to the hotel and parked across the street. I sat in my car, windows cracked, watching the entrance. About 20 minutes later, I saw her. She walked in wearing the black dress I had bought her for her birthday last year. The one she said made her feel beautiful. She was smiling, her phone pressed to her ear. A few minutes later, George arrived. He was tall, well-dressed, confident in a way I had never been. He walked into the hotel like he owned the place. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. My mind raced with images I did not want to see. Images of them together. Laughing. Touching. doing things that were supposed to be sacred between her and me. At around 11, they came out. Together. George had his arm around her waist. Mary was laughing, leaning into him like she belonged there. They stopped near the entrance, and he kissed her. Not a quick peck. A real kiss. Long, deep, intimate. I looked away. My chest felt like it was caving in. I started the car and drove home. I did not confront them. I did not make a scene. I just left. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room and waited. Mary came home around midnight. She was humming softly as she walked in, her face flushed, her hair slightly messy. She saw me sitting on the couch and jumped. She said, "Oh my God, David. You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" I did not answer. She turned on the light and looked at me, her expression shifting to concern. She asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "How was the work event?" She hesitated for just a moment, then she smiled and said, "It was fine. Boring, actually, lots of networking." I nodded slowly. I said, "That is funny." She frowned and asked, "What is?" I said, "Because I called your office earlier. They said there was no work event tonight." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I stood up and walked toward her. I said, "Where were you, Mary?" She stammered, I was with Sarah. We went to dinner and I did not want to bother you, so I just said it was a work thing." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I could not believe she was still lying to my face. I said, "You were with George?" Her eyes widened. She said, "What? No. David, why would you?" I cut her off. I said, "I followed you. I saw you." She froze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a deep breath and her expression changed. The guilt disappeared. The panic faded. In its place was something cold. Defensive. She said, "So you followed me. You have been spying on me." I said, "You have been cheating on me." She crossed her arms and said, "Maybe I would not have cheated if you were not so suffocating. Maybe if you actually made me happy, I would not have needed someone else." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, unable to process what she had just said. She continued, "You are always so needy, so emotional, so exhausting. Do you know how hard it is to be with someone who is constantly falling apart? I have tried, David. I have tried so hard to be there for you, but you just drain me." I felt my hands start to shake. I said, "I was falling apart because of you. Because you made me feel like I was crazy for wanting you to care." She scoffed and said, "Everything is always my fault, right? You never take responsibility for anything." I took a step closer to her. I said, "I gave you everything. I supported you. I loved you. I tried so hard to make you happy. And you repaid me by laughing at my pain with another man." She rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, here we go again with the victim act." I said, "You sent him my suicide note. You laughed about it." Her face flushed. She said, "I did not laugh, Yes, you did," I said. "I saw the messages, Mary. I saw everything." She was silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Maybe I laughed because it is ridiculous, David. You write these dramatic notes and never do anything. You just want attention." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not violently. Just a cold, quiet snap. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. This woman did not love me. She probably never had. I had been a convenience to her. A safety net. Someone she could rely on while she figured out what she really wanted. And now that she had found it, I was just in the way. I said, "I want a divorce." She blinked, surprised. Then she laughed. She actually laughed. She said, "Fine. Go ahead. File for divorce. But you are not getting anything. The apartment is in my name. Half of everything you own is mine. And when this is over, George and I are going to be happy, and you are going to be alone, exactly like you deserve." I nodded slowly. I said, "We will see about that." She smirked and walked past me into the bedroom. I stood there in the living room, my heart pounding, my mind racing. She thought she had won. She thought I was too weak, too broken to fight back. But she was wrong. Because I had spent the last month planning, documenting, preparing. And now, it was time to make her pay. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in months. Mary was still asleep beside me, her back turned, her breathing slow and steady. I got up quietly, got dressed, and left the apartment without waking her. I had an appointment with a lawyer. His name was Jonathan Pierce, and he was known for being ruthless in divorce cases. I had done my research. If I was going to destroy Mary, I needed someone who knew how to hit where it hurt. Jonathan was a man in his early 50s, sharply dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from winning more battles than you have lost. He listened patiently as I explained the situation, showed him the screenshots, the voice notes, the evidence I had been collecting for weeks. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. He said, "You have more than enough to prove infidelity. In this state, that gives us leverage. We can push for a larger share of the assets, and given that she was using marital funds to support the affair, we can make a strong case for financial misconduct as well." I asked, "What about the apartment?" He said, "It is in her name, but you have been paying the mortgage for 5 years. We can argue for compensation." He paused, then added, "But if you really want to hurt her, we go after everything. Savings, investments, her business equipment, everything." I nodded. I said, "I want her to feel what I felt." He said, "Then let me handle it." We filed for divorce that afternoon. The papers were served to Mary 2 days later, while she was at a coffee shop with George. I was not there to see her reaction, but Sarah, who happened to be nearby, sent me a message later. She wrote, "Mary just got served. She looked like she was about to cry. George looked pissed." I smiled. It was starting. That evening, Mary came home furious. She slammed the door so hard the walls shook. She stormed into the living room where I was sitting calmly on the couch, reading a book. She threw the divorce papers at me and screamed, "What the hell is this?" I looked up at her and said, "It is exactly what it looks like." She said, "You actually filed for divorce." I said, "You told me to." She said, "I did not think you would actually do it." I shrugged and said, "Well, I did." She started pacing, running her hands through her hair, her voice rising. She said, "Do you have any idea what you just did? This is going to ruin everything." I said, "Good." She stopped and stared at me. She said, "What?" I set the book down and stood up. I said, "You thought I was weak. You thought I would just roll over and let you walk all over me. But you were wrong, Mary. I am done being your doormat." Her eyes filled with tears. She said, "David, please. Can we just talk about this?" I laughed bitterly. I said, "Now you want to talk? Now that you are about to lose something?" She said, "I made a mistake, okay. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy." "We can," I cut her off. I said, "No. We cannot. You did not just hurt me, Mary. You humiliated me. You mocked my pain. You shared my darkest moments with another man and laughed about it." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She said, "I did not mean it like that. I was just venting." I said, "Venting? You told him you wished you never married me." She froze. I continued, "You told him I was exhausting. Pathetic, a burden, and then you let him call me weak while you agreed with him." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. She said, "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not mean any of it." I said, "Yes, you did, and now you are going to pay for it." She looked up at me, her face red and blotchy, her voice breaking. She said, "What do you want from me?" I said, "I want you to feel what I felt." Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings became brutal. Jonathan went after everything. He subpoenaed her bank records and found that she had been spending thousands of dollars on hotels, dinners, and gifts for George. Money that came from our joint account. Money that I had earned. He presented it all in court, painting Mary as a manipulative cheater who had not only betrayed her husband emotionally but financially as well. Mary tried to fight back. She hired her own lawyer, a woman named Rebecca, who tried to argue that I was controlling and emotionally abusive, that Mary had been driven to cheat because of my behavior. But Jonathan tore that argument apart. He presented the messages where Mary and George mocked me. He played the voice notes where she laughed about my suicide note drafts. He showed the court that I had been the one supporting her financially for years, while she built her freelance career. The judge was not sympathetic to Mary. At one point, during a particularly heated exchange, the judge looked at her and said, "Ma'am, infidelity is one thing. But using marital funds to support an affair while mocking your spouse's mental health struggles is another. You do not have much of a leg to stand on here." Mary broke down in court that day. She sobbed so hard, her lawyer had to call for a recess. I sat there watching her, feeling nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just emptiness. But the real turning point came when I revealed my final move. During one of the hearings, Jonathan presented evidence that Mary had been planning to leave me for months. She had opened a separate bank account, transferred money into it without my knowledge, and had even started looking at apartments with George. She had been preparing to blindside me, to take half of everything and leave me with nothing while she started a new life with him. The judge was furious. He ruled in my favor on almost everything. I got the majority of our savings. I got compensation for the apartment. I even got her to pay my legal fees. Mary walked out of that courtroom with almost nothing. But I was not done yet. Because the final blow was not about money. It was about George. I had been digging into George's life for weeks. I found out that he was married. His wife, a woman named Emily, had no idea he was having an affair with Mary. So I sent her everything. Every message. Every photo. Every voice note. I sent it all. 2 days later, George's wife filed for divorce. And because they had 2 kids together, the custody battle was going to be ugly. George called me, furious, screaming into the phone about how I had ruined his life. I said, good. Then I hung up. Mary found out what I had done a few days later. She came to my new apartment, banging on the door, screaming at me through the hallway. She said, "You destroyed him. You destroyed his family." I opened the door and looked at her. She was a mess. Her hair was unwashed. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she had not slept in days. I said, "He destroyed mine first." She started crying, collapsing against the doorframe. She said, "I have nothing left, David. Nothing. You took everything from me." I said, "No. You took everything from yourself." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, and whispered, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said, "I do not care." And I closed the door. 6 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. I had moved into a new apartment across town, a small but comfortable place that felt like mine. No memories of Mary. No ghosts of the past. Just clean, empty space that I could fill however I wanted. I started going to therapy, real therapy, with a professional who did not dismiss my feelings or tell me to just get over it. It helped. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe I started to feel like someone new. Someone stronger. I also started going to the gym regularly. Not out of anger or revenge, but because I wanted to take care of myself. I wanted to prove to myself that I was worth the effort. I made new friends. People from the gym, people from a book club I joined. People who did not know anything about Mary or George or the divorce. People who just liked me for who I was. It was strange at first, learning how to exist without the weight of Mary's betrayal crushing me every day. But eventually, it became easier. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped wondering what she was doing or who she was with. I stopped caring. One evening, I was at a coffee shop near my apartment, reading a novel and enjoying the quiet, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I looked up. It was Sarah, Mary's best friend. Or at least, she used to be. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her hands. She asked, "Can I sit?" I hesitated, then nodded. She sat down across from me, ordered a tea, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, "I just wanted to tell you that I am sorry." I frowned and asked, "For what?" She said, "For not telling you sooner. I knew about George. I knew what Mary was doing, and I did not say anything. I thought it was not my place. But I was wrong. You deserve to know." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "Thank you." She nodded, looking relieved. Then she said, "I do not talk to Mary anymore, by the way. After everything that happened, after I saw how she treated you, I could not stay friends with her." I asked, "How is she?" Sarah sighed and said, "Not good. She and George broke up a few months ago. He blamed her for ruining his marriage, and she blamed him for encouraging her to cheat in the first place. They had a huge fight and have not spoken since." She paused. Then added, "She is living with her parents now. She lost her freelance clients because word got out about the affair, and no one wants to work with her. She has been applying for jobs, but nothing has worked out." I felt a flicker of something. Not quite sympathy, but not quite satisfaction either. Just a quiet acknowledgement that she was facing the consequences of her actions. Sarah continued, "She asks about you sometimes. Wants to know if you are okay. I think she regrets what she did." I said, "It does not matter if she regrets it. It does not change what happened." Sarah nodded and said, "You are right." She stood up to leave. Then turned back and said, "For what it is worth, I think you are handling this really well. A lot of people would have fallen apart. But you did not. You are stronger than she ever gave you credit for." I smiled slightly and said, "Thank you." After she left, I sat there for a while, thinking. Mary had spent so long making me feel like I was nothing, like I was too weak to survive without her. But I had survived. And not only that, I had thrived. I finished my coffee, packed up my things, and walked home. The night air was cool, and the city lights flickered around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. A few weeks later, I ran into Mary. I was at a grocery store, picking up ingredients for dinner. When I saw her in the checkout line, she looked different. Thinner. Tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing an old sweater I remembered from years ago. She saw me at the same time I saw her. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she walked over. She said quietly, "Hi, David." I said, "Hi." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looking uncomfortable. She said, "How have you been?" I said, "Good. You?" She hesitated, then said, "I have been better." An awkward silence settled between us. Then she said, "I just want you to know that I am sorry. For everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. I did not hate her anymore. I did not love her either. I just felt nothing. I said, "I appreciate that." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She said, Do you think we could ever be friends?" I shook my head and said, "No. I do not think so." She looked down, wiping her eyes. She said, "I understand." I said, "I hope you figure things out, Mary. I really do. But I do not want you in my life anymore." She nodded again, her voice breaking as she said, "Okay." She turned and walked away, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of closure. I paid for my groceries, drove home, and made dinner. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city. I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the revenge. And I realized something. Revenge had not healed me. It had not made me feel better. What had healed me was letting go. Choosing to move forward. Choosing to build a life that did not revolve around Mary or the hurt she caused. I had spent so long crying, begging, trying to make her see me. And in the end, the best revenge was not making her cry. It was becoming someone who did not need her anymore. Someone who was happy without her. Someone who had learned that love should never make you feel small. I smiled to myself, took a sip of wine, and whispered into the night, "I am free." And for the first time in years, I truly meant it.